Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating and air, restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marcos Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
They made the long journey to the United States only to be deported. Thank you for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. When the Biden administration announced new immigration enforcement measures for Venezuelan nationals, officials said those already in the U.S. would not be retroactively deported. But several migrants told KPBS border reporter Gustavo Solis that is what happened to them.
Juan Carlos Torres turned himself in to border officials in El Paso on October 7th, 5 days before the Biden administration announced new rules restricting Venezuelan nationals from entering the country. That new rule should not have impacted Torres. U.S. officials are clear on this, saying to the Miami Herald, quote, "This process in itself does not apply to individuals who are already in the United States." But that's exactly what happened to Torres, and he has a receipt to prove it. Torres kept a baggage check receipt from border officials dated October 7th. It shows that he was in federal custody before the new rule went into effect. Torres says that he was kept in a holding facility with 300 other men for 6 days and then deported on October 13th, 1 day after the new policy was announced. He says it felt like border officials were just waiting for the law to change. Torres now lives in a Tijuana shelter with roughly 100 other migrants, 20 of them from Venezuela. The Catholic shelter runs a free breakfast programs, and migrants there volunteer as cooks and servers. Several other Venezuelan nationals say that they too entered the country before the new rule. Frederick Soto spent Wednesday morning serving breakfast to migrants and homeless people. He says the majority of Venezuelans in the shelter entered the U.S. before the new rule.
Todos entraron el 6 y el 5 y los dejaron retenidos 5, 6, 7, 8 días y después los devolvieron a todito. Más que todo eso los que están aquí.
What's particularly frustrating to Soto and others in the shelter is that they now have to compete with millions of people still living in Venezuela for just 24,000 spots to enter the U.S. legally. Soto paid thousands of dollars and spent months hiking through the jungles and getting shaken down by corrupt officials in Central America to get to the border. He doesn't think it's fair that he might lose a spot to someone who can apply from Venezuela.
Ese trámite le permite a cualquier persona de cualquier parte del mundo, cualquier venezolano, optar a la visa. Entonces puede haber 24,000 personas en Venezuela que soliciten la visa y yo me quedo aquí flotando.
The Department of Homeland Security did not respond to a request for comment. Gustavo Solis, KPBS News.
When you think of firefighting, you don't necessarily think of deputies, but there is a unique helicopter program that will make you think of firefighting and rescues in a whole new way. KPBS reporter Kitty Alvarado went to the base in El Cajon.
Fighting fires in San Diego County is one of the toughest missions, and often the first ones flying in are not firefighters.
Copter 11, go for board, sir.
That's the San Diego County Sheriff's Department's ASTRIA, or Aerial Support to Regional Enforcement Agencies Unit. It plays a unique role in fire suppression and rescue operations for CAL FIRE San Diego. They have 7 helicopters and fly about 2,000 emergency calls every year.
It's been extremely successful. It's the only one like it, where you have the fire side of the house meeting with the law enforcement side of the house for this mission. And this far, it's been a raving success.
That's Sergeant Scott Bly, one of the fire pilots. The morning for the ASTRIA pilots and CAL FIRE crew starts off with a fire weather briefing.
Coastal area is going to be mostly sunny, 67 to 72.
Then they head off for some training with the new harnesses. The ASTRIA helicopter is the only one that does rescues for the county for CAL FIRE. But they are a critical asset when it comes to fighting fires because they are the only helicopter that stays within county lines, and they're often the first one on scene.
We send a full aerial and ground response to it, just in case. We never know, especially with some of the winds and the low humidities that we have and high temperatures, and we're going to be there for it in case it does run.
And every attack is dangerous. The pilots fighting these missions are on another level. Just to be a fire pilot for Astria, you have to have 2,000 helicopter hours. They're dealing with conditions and hazards that standard pilots are not prepared to handle.
The smoke, the power lines, the trees or snags, the terrain, and the winds, especially on fires, can be absolutely hellacious. But we're not going to push it to the point where we're going to have that mishap. We're going to understand what our limitations are and what the limitations of the aircraft are, and go up until that point.
And the missions that stay with him are the ones that involve children, like when he was on a fire a few years back in North County.
Saw a bunch of children's toys in the backyard, so I knew, that kids are living at that house, and we shifted our mission to save that particular house. Our efforts saved that house, so it was pretty satisfying knowing that those kids got to go back to their house.
And what he's learned in the 20 years he's been fighting fires with the Astria unit: be ready for anything.
You can send me all the weather reports you want and tell me that it's going to be horrible or it's going to be great, and it could be 180 degrees out from what we plan on. So we're always going to be ready to do whatever comes our way.
Kitty Alvarado, KPBS News.
President Joe Biden took aim at the economy today, laying out the steps his administration is taking to provide consumers with what it calls more breathing room. As Chris Wynn reports, this comes as millions of Americans continue to struggle with rising costs.
Today, my administration is announcing new actions to lower the cost of everyday living for American families, to put more money in the pockets of middle income and working class Americans, to hold big corporations accountable.
The Biden administration is now taking action across agencies to help cut down on so-called junk fees, defining them as designed either to confuse or deceive consumers or to take advantage of lock-in or other forms of situational market power.
These are junk fees. They're unfair and they hit marginalized Americans the hardest, especially low-income folks.
According to officials with the National Economic Council, the fees fall into 4 categories: mandatory fees that often hide the full price, surprise fees that consumers learn after purchase, exploitative or predatory fees, and fraudulent fees. The White House points to hidden charges and added fees on airline tickets, hotel bookings, and cable bills. And the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau is issuing guidance on some banking fees.
We're taking enforcement actions, like one against a large bank for charging illegal overdraft fees, and customers will see hundreds of millions of dollars in refunds.
The new rulemaking process aims to make fees more transparent and comes with the midterms less than 2 weeks away.
This is an attempt to tell voters that they are trying to ease the pains of the pocketbook, because that's what Republicans have said over and over again.
Chris Wynn, KPBS News.
It's a pace that has not been seen since the Great Recession. San Diego home prices are among the fastest decreasing in the country. They were down 2.5% from July to August, according to SP Case-Shiller. And that drop hasn't been seen since 2008. And it's not just San Diego, too. The nation is going through a slowdown brought on by rising mortgage rates. In general, home prices are still up 12.7% annually in San Diego metro area. Redfin says the median sale price in August for a single-family home was $900,000. San Diego air quality regulators will decide tomorrow on a timeline for a fuel company to eliminate odors coming from its Barrio Logan factory. Here's KPBS environment reporter Eric Anderson.
Neighbors living near the Newton Street facility have been complaining about the strong odor coming from the New Leaf biofuels plant for nearly a year. The company turns used cooking oil into diesel fuel. One byproduct is a pungent smell that is so strong, people living near the facility feel like they can't go outside.
We perfectly understand that the neighbours find this to be a nuisance, but it's not hazardous chemicals or anything. There's nothing hazardous about this. It's used cooking oil. This is the oil that was cooking your fries a week ago.
The company has been working with regulators to come up with a solution. They hope to install filters.
And activated carbon is an acknowledged odor control solution. It's used widely in many industries for absorbing precisely the sort of chemicals that are in used cooking oil to control odor.
The company says it is still waiting on an industrial fan for the odor control system, which they don't expect until the end of November. But another month of odors is too much for a community that's been dealing with the smell for nearly a year.
We need an immediate pause on all operations at New Leaf Biofuel until they can show us that there's an operating odor control system.
Paul says residents have suffered enough and they shouldn't have to continue to deal with the pungent smell. They plan to be out in force at the air quality hearing.
This is a big moment for our community. I think for the first time in a really long time, APCD stepping up to meet the moment. They are saying that, if industry is going to impact community health and quality of life, they're willing to step in.
Regulators will decide whether a December deadline is sufficient or if they need to take harsher action. Eric Anderson, KPBS News.
A doctor who was on duty the day an inmate died at a county jail is now facing charges. Dr. Frederick Von Lintig pleaded not guilty today to involuntary manslaughter in the death of Elisa Serna. The 24-year-old inmate died at Las Colinas detention facility in November of 2019. A former nurse was also charged in Serna's death last year. The rising number of in-custody deaths in county jails is top of mind for San Diego voters who will pick the county's new sheriff. The two candidates, Under Sheriff Kelly Martinez and former criminal prosecutor John Hemmerling, were part of a public forum last night. In the past year alone, the Sheriff's Department reported 18 deaths. And our media partner, ABC 10 News, spoke with one woman who says her father died in his cell after he'd been arrested on suspicion of being under the influence of a controlled substance.
They thought he was on drugs, and that was not the case. He had dementia and uncontrolled diabetes. We just need a huge change. We need an overhaul, because if it was one of their family members, guaranteed things would change.
On the issue of jail deaths, Martinez told KPBS that reducing contraband coming into facilities is a huge priority, and that since she's been the undersheriff, mail processing has been centralized so it can be screened better. Hemmerling said the department needs to do better to ensure individuals get the help that they need before they come into jail, and that some shouldn't be in jail to start with. Voters are seeing two sports betting propositions this election cycle. While Props 26 and 27 are similar, KPBS reporter Matt Hoffman says they are also very different.
Another special interest ballot proposition.
Hundreds of millions are being spent on Propositions 26 and 27. It's almost hard to miss all of their online and TV ads.
Only one proposition supports California tribes like ours.
Vote no on Prop 27.
Yes, on Prop 27.
Both would amend the state constitution to allow for sports wagering in California. Proposition 26 would introduce dice games like roulette and in-person sports wagering at tribal casinos. It would also allow sports betting at 4 racetracks in California, including in Del Mar. Kathy Fairbanks is the spokesperson for the Yes on 26, No on 27 campaign.
People betting will have to show their IDs. Someone will check their IDs and make sure that they're adults and that they're following the law and they're gambling legally.
Fairbanks represents a coalition of business groups and more than 50 tribes. Locally, the Barona Band of Mission Indians and the Sequan Band of the Kumeyaay Nation have contributed to the campaign. Tribes would need to work with the state to determine government payouts, and racetracks would be required to pay 10% of daily bets minus winnings.
The independent nonpartisan legislative analyst says that Proposition 26 will result in tens of millions of dollars going to California coffers to fund state priorities like education, transportation, even homelessness efforts.
The other proposition, 27, would legalize online sports betting for tribes and online gambling companies. Businesses would have to partner with a tribe to get a license. It's backed by betting companies like FanDuel, BetMGM, and DraftKings, along with a few smaller tribes. Nathan Click is the spokesperson for Prop 27.
25 other states have legalized online sports betting. They're proving that you can do so safely and responsibly.
responsibly and create real revenue for states.
Under Prop 27, a tenth of betting profits would go to address homelessness, with a smaller portion of that split among tribes without casinos.
The state's independent auditor takes a look at every initiative that crosses its path. They found that only Prop 27 would raise hundreds of millions of dollars each year that would go directly towards homelessness and mental health support.
Prop 27 is supported locally by the CEO of San Diego's Regional Task Force on Homelessness.
I'm supportive of whatever it takes to get dedicated, committed funding on a permanent basis.
Tamara Kohler says it's an opportunity to finally secure a permanent funding source.
This funding is also not just for supporting, the housing solutions, but also mental health, behavioral health, treatment supports, and above all, housing.
If Prop 26 passes, it would mean a sports book could open at the Del Mar Thoroughbred Club. President and Chief Operating Officer Josh Rubenstein says his organization is supporting the measure. He thinks a sports book would help support the racing business and increase tax revenue.
In terms of foot traffic for these local businesses, you would think for busy events like the Super Bowl and the Final Four, that would translate to additional business for North San Diego County.
The public has been hammered with ads from both propositions, yet a UC Berkeley LA Times poll from earlier this month found the measures polling under 50%. Both need a simple majority to pass.
Our priority, the tribe's priority from day one, since 27 showed up, was to defeat that measure. So we are looking at the poll results in a positive light because our number one priority is being met.
Click with the Proposition 27 campaign says they're undaunted.
The voters I talk to, they understand completely, we need a solution to homelessness. They support online sports betting, and it's a win-win for the state of California.
For more information, check out the KPBS Voter Hub online. Matt Hoffman, KPBS News.
And we have a correction to an election story that we brought you on Monday, October 17th. In the race for San Diego City Council District 4, we mistakenly showed you the map for San Diego County Board of Supervisors districts, and we regret that error. For more on the election, you can check out the KPBS Voter Hub at kpbs.org, and that is where you'll find explainers of the key races and an in-depth ballot guide tailored to your district. You can get there by clicking the Voter Hub link on our homepage.
I'm Amna Nawaz. Tonight on the NewsHour, the risk candidates could pose to American elections if they refuse to concede. That's coming up at 7, right after Evening Edition on KPBS.
A state public hearing was held today to help California teachers prepare to teach ethnic studies. And last year, the legislature passed a law requiring students to take ethnic studies for high school graduation. KPBS education reporter MG Perez has more on the effort to make that happen.
If I love and respect you, I love and respect myself.
An ethnic studies class is already offered at Lincoln High School and other campuses in the San Diego Unified School District. Before the end of the decade, it will be a graduation requirement for every student in California.
There's been some different opinions on ethnic studies. It is not something that is erasing history, because you can't erase history that's never been taught correctly in the state of California.
Late this morning, members of the State Assembly Committee on Higher Education held a public hearing on the Cal State San Bernardino campus. There were education experts in person and online, offering suggestions on how best to train teachers and develop curriculum that more closely reflects the history, culture, and struggles of California's diverse population. Since 2018, Dr. Michael Dominguez has created curriculum for an ethnic studies teaching certificate at San Diego State.
Ethnic studies is a unique, distinct field and discipline that necessarily engages with questions and academic definitions of race, ethnicity, culture, identity, and power. And if we fail to ensure that teachers are prepared to engage with those content area topics in nuanced, responsive, and developmentally appropriate ways, right, then there's considerable harm that can be done to students, to schools, and communities.
Right now, teachers with a social studies single subject credential are possibly the most qualified to teach ethnic studies. But there will be much more to lesson plans in the future to educate students on community, cultures, and the diversity of marginalized people.
Making sure that we follow what Assemblymember our Chair Medina put in AB 101 is extremely important, so that all of our students know that they belong, that this is their history and this is their California.
Besides figuring out what to teach in ethnic studies, education administrators also need to figure out strategies for recruiting and retaining teachers who are people of color and experienced with working in diverse communities. One idea for attracting new teachers is to pay them for the 4 to 5 months they spend doing their student teaching. Right now, they're expected to put their lives on hold and work for free. The Assembly Committee is also considering allowing college graduates with an ethnic studies degree to go straight into a classroom without additional certification. Whatever is decided has to be in place by the 2025-26 school year, as required by the new state law. MG Perez, KPBS News.
A legal challenge to President Biden's student loan forgiveness program has millions of people wondering what now. The White House had previously identified this week as the soonest some borrowers could see their debt canceled. Jen Sullivan breaks down what those who qualify for relief should know.
Debt relief in legal limbo. A federal appeals court put President Joe Biden's student loan forgiveness program on pause for now.
I'm still waiting for that relief, right? No one's had their debt canceled yet.
Friday's move barred the administration from canceling loans, while the court considers a legal challenge from 6 Republican-led states. So, what does it mean for the more than 20 million people who've applied for relief so far? The Biden administration appears confident the program will prevail.
We're not deterred. We'll keep fighting for you and pushing through.
The administration had said Sunday was the earliest day it would start discharging loans. So people will now have to wait a little longer while the program's fate is decided.
I'm one of the people that we're fighting for.
Cody Hunanian is the executive director of the Student Debt Crisis Center, a nonprofit focused on ending the student debt crisis, who is also waiting for some of his debt to be forgiven.
It's not going to erase my entire debt, but it's a third of my student loan debt, and it opens up the door, hopefully, for the ability to purchase a home, invest in myself in a different way.
The program would dismiss up to $10,000 in debt for eligible applicants, up to $20,000 if they received Pell Grants. So, what should you do if you qualify? The White House is still encouraging people to apply at studentaid.gov. And the Better Business Bureau continues to remind you to beware of ongoing scams.
Scammers have been right there to take advantage. They know that there's a bit of confusion about what's going to happen next.
For today's Consumer Watch, I'm Jen Sullivan.
Flu cases are rising in San Diego County, and that has doctors encouraging everyone to get their flu shot. Just over 900 flu cases have been reported in October. That's double last month's total. Health officials are noticing a trend this year. Rather than adults 18 to 49 years old accounting for half of all cases, this year it's kids. So far this month, 67% of cases have been in children.
2 weeks ago, we started seeing the evidence of this. Started with the high schools. We were saying all of a sudden a lot of people called out sick. And we were tracking all along, but we started to see an increase in influenza.
And free flu shots are available at public health centers across the county. Appointments are recommended, but they're not required. You can find more information at sandiegocounty.gov.
Now, some subtle changes to talk about over the course of the next couple of days. We even notice a little bit more of an offshore flow of wind later on Thursday. That'll have an impact on how far we start to see the low clouds move their way inland. Dry conditions persisting, though, for the most part, and no significant heat or chill as we go down the road. With that said, let's talk tonight, and we'll drop back down into the mid-50s around Oceanside. San Diego 60, Chula Vista at 57, Mount Laguna dropping down into the mid mid-40s. And we'll note again as we go throughout the late night to early Thursday, there will be some low clouds again, more so at the coast. We'll start to see a little push of northeasterly winds. And that'll keep most of the low clouds into some of the foggy conditions confined to the coast and not getting as far inland to some of those inland western valleys as we go into your next couple of days. Troughiness means it's a little cool still out over the mountains and the deserts, but we'll notice as we go down the road and this dip in the jet stream slides east, we'll see those temperatures begin to climb. Pretty close to normal here, a couple degrees below normal San Diego as we go into tomorrow. High temperature 71. 72 at Oceanside, Ramona 74, Borrego Springs back into the low 80s. Seasonably chilly back to our east as we go into Friday, but again, tranquil. Yeah, that is the name of the game here as we work our way into and in fact through the upcoming weekend. Notice a slight change with our temperature here for, again, the coast. A couple degrees warmer as we go into and through the weekend. Again, we'll still have some of the morning low clouds and fogginess. Inland interior valleys, though, with that northeasterly wind, I think that'll move out some of the low clouds here. We're talking mostly sunny skies as we go throughout the period, and temperatures will be climbing up into the upper 70s later on this weekend. We'll notice a little bit of warming here over some of the mountainous terrain and communities into the weekend. And the desert's also warming up as we go into Saturday and into Sunday. For KPBS News, I'm meteorologist Justin Pavic.
Well, Halloween is almost here, but it's not just for us humans, evidently. On this National Pumpkin Day, the folks at Birch Aquarium are creating enrichment for the giant Pacific octopus by hiding treats inside of a pumpkin so that she can find them. Not only is it festive, it also provides her with mental and physical stimulation as she uses all 8 of her arms to check it out. And it is a great time for her wellness check, too. Very cool. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org. Thanks for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Good night.
Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating and air, restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley. And by the following: and by viewers like you. Thank you.